Please be seated. My name is Ignacio, and I'll be guiding you through the opening session. Before we begin this, a few brief housekeeping notes. 7. 1. We have simultaneous interpretation in French and in English and in Korean. So if you need one of these, they're just outside of the theater. And you can use these handsets and select your preferred channel. That should be coming on the screen. In addition, we offer AI-powered live translation with the Wordly platform, and that's accessible on your device, but I really do need it on the screen. Nicolas, can I have the PowerPoint on there? There we are, okay. So the interpretation channels and then the QR code to support over 60 languages. So we're gathered here in the Court Palace, which is a former Belle Époque, and this theater, the main theater, has known and has hosted countless dialogues for peace, reconciliation, and democracy. A third point, in case of emergency, please follow the guidance of staff. From here, it's to the left to the exit. Respect and care. If you feel unsafe or experience anything concerning, please speak to one of our safeguarding colleagues, which are clearly identifiable by their badges. We are signatory of the ARETA Charter Against Discrimination. ARETA, yeah? So ARETA Franklin, respect, find out what it meant to me. Number 5, some people have red lanyards. These are people who do not want to be photographed. So also if you're using your personal phones to take photographs, please make sure you don't take photographs of people with a red lanyard. Number 6, this is live streamed. This is a live streamed session. And number 7, and here's where I switch into French, just to check that people have what they need to be able to follow in English and in French. À Caux, nous assouplissons doucement la formalité souvent présente dans les conférences de haut niveau. Et en réalité, ceci n'est pas une conférence. Si vous êtes venu voir une conférence, ce n'est pas la bonne adresse. C'est autre chose. Et nous vous invitons à vous engager d'abord en tant qu'être humain, ouvert au dialogue, à l'écoute et à la co-création, et que vous soyez Premier ministre, souverain d'un royaume, ambassadeur, étudiant ou leader de terrain, cet espace nous appartient à tous. Et maintenant que cela est posé, les 7 points de housekeeping, pour commencer, nous avons vraiment l'honneur d'entendre Jacqueline Côté, la présidente de la Fondation Co-Initiative et Changement. Elle apporte une riche expérience en droit international, en diplomatie et développement durable, en support au directeur exécutif. Et veuillez accueillir chaleureusement Jacqueline Côté pour ouvrir cette cérémonie.
No. Thank you very much, Ignacio. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, as Ignacio has mentioned, no protocol here. On behalf of the Co-Foundation, it is really a privilege and a pleasure for me to greet you here today to mark the opening of our five-day residential forum on democracy. We must be about 250 in the room. We will be close to 300 throughout the forum, and many more are online, and I would like to greet you all. This forum aims to take a fresh look at how to revitalize democracy. And by democracy, you immediately think the rule of law, and that's not because I'm a lawyer, but that's the thing that comes naturally, the protection of fundamental rights and freedom, like the freedom of speech, religion, or assembly, free and fair elections, and functioning government. All indexes, unfortunately, point to a stark decline in all these aspects of democracy. Even in Europe, which has been brandied as a bastion of democracy. But this is not what I want to talk about. You all read the media. You're not here to listen to me lament about democracy. No, I hope, you are here because you truly believe that there is hope. Hope in our humanity. We're all here together. Hope that by sharing your personal experiences, you will reclaim your agency on democracy. I grant you no single person can reverse the tide of dissatisfaction that, in the way democracy is functioning now. But I believe that we are convinced, and you are convinced, that by revitalizing democracy, you start with the people. You, I, your neighbor. People need more information and more participation, but frankly, people need to care more about one another. As you will discover throughout this forum, democracy can only thrive if there's trust and integrity. And for this to emerge, it requires courage and hope. And these are the main themes that will accompany you throughout the next 5 days. This is your special moment for those of you who stay with us for the 5 days to connect, reflect, and unite in defending democratic values in these challenging times. Are there people here for the first time? I know Mr. Lazzarini comes here for the first time. There are other people who are here for the first time? Oh yeah, quite a number of you. So let's just, yes, and bravo for being here. Let me just tell you a bit of history. So CO is a charitable foundation that was created in 1946. And that was through the courage and generosity of 100 Swiss citizens. Emerging out of the Second World War, these individuals felt they had a vision of a world that was just, peaceful, and sustainable. But for this to happen, you needed reconciliation in Europe. So they purchased the CO Palace, and with their resources and also with their hands, they actually brought this building to the CO Foundation to operate as a center for dialogue and reconciliation. And we've been basically doing this now for nearly 80 years. CO is a place of welcome and diversity, both committed and transformative, offering a safe space for encounters between people in search of meaning. It is a haven of peace. And as you will discover, this is a magical place. You can't see the view and the sun coming out, but it's a place where you feel good. We believe that personal change and global change go hand in hand, and everyone has the power and responsibility to be the change they want to see in the world. CO is also part of a worldwide movement called Initiatives of Change, with an international secretariat that is accredited to ECOSOC and the Council of Europe. And so we connect intimately to International Geneva and also in Strasbourg. And though we're quite aware of the attacks on multilateralism, we believe we have a special role to offer, which is complementary and which to resolving the world's divide. And finally, just a word to say that we host groups from the private sector, public, nonprofit, who are in search of a special place to spend a few days with their team or to do a special training. We're much cheaper than the Montreux Palace, and I think we're a much nicer bunch of people. This is what we've coined this hospitality for change. So in addition to offering you our premises at a very reduced price, we also allow you or offer you some of the approaches of our foundation, facilitation and training. So do let us know if your organization may be interested to spend some time here. So back to our forum. As you will see from the program, we have reserved a special place for our youth change makers and You will hear from them in most sessions. They will be the one to carry the flag, obviously, and there's some young ones here in the front row, and we hope they carry the flag, they tell their father what to do with this horrible situation that we're facing. Their fresh perspective allows us to keep on track. And we have also reserved a special place for the arts. And in addition to musical interludes, like the one we just had now, there are several cultural exhibitions in the house, and there will be artistic performances starting this evening. Ignacio will explain the rest of the program a little later on, but I wanted to personally thank our 3 keynote speakers today for having taken the time and also the courage to come to Co. This is not just your next door place. And I appreciate the time and the energy that you put to be here. And I would like to mention them one by one. Ambassador Francesca Camilleri, who's the chair of the Committee of Ministers' Deputies to the Council of Europe, and Malta permanent representative. And she will speak to Europe's shared values and collective commitment to democracy and the rule of law. Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNRWA, who is facing extraordinary challenges at the moment in the Middle East, and Gaza in particular, and who has accepted to bring us his insights from the front line of humanitarian law and multilateral cooperation. And finally, our homegrown Joseph Theiss, former president of the Swiss Confederation, former president of the United Nations General Assembly, who will offer his reflections on the urgent need for unity under the banner of one humanity. We are so very grateful to have you with us today. So very briefly, just to say that partnering with others is one of our foundation's key pillars. Nobody can go alone, and there are many of them that have supported us throughout the forum this week. And I encourage you to look on our communications material because the list is so long and we are running out of time. And I would like to finally end with a word of thank you to every member of our foundation board, and there are several of them here today. Also our executive director, Ignacio Packer, our wonderful team, and very many members of our movement, Initiatives of Change, who have come from all different places to make sure that you get what you're looking for by coming here. So next, we turn to a fresh and powerful voice of today's and tomorrow's democracy, Hajar Bishri from Morocco. She brings her journey from the Co-Peace and Leadership Program to her current doctoral work in Hungary. She's a key member of our creative leadership team, and she will introduce us to the perspective of youth in the quest to reimagine democracy. Please welcome Hajar.
Hello. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Hajar. I am today representing the Creative Leadership Program. This is one of Co-Initiative's youth program. We've been here, many of us. This exact hall has been the place where their peace-building journey has started. And I'm happy that today it continues. These hallways have seen many different versions of each and every one of us of the team, and I'm so proud that today it gets to see another version, one where we're leading a pilot program of reimagining democracies. This is a space where 17 young leaders from around the world came together with their own unique experiences of what democracy is, to ask each other important questions, difficult questions of what democracy means to them, not just in theory, but also in action and in reality. We've also However, we've also are asking questions of how can we as creative leaders also reimagine what it means for each of our communities, but also for our future. And you'll see now a short film of what we've been doing for the past 2 days. And it's really also the beginning of so many new leaders and their journey into peace. I hope it sparks something within you, like it does for us, and thank you.
My definition of democracy is as simple as everyone having a seat at the table.
Opportunity and the encouragement for everyone being able to fully flourish.
The freedom of thought, expression.
The equal representation of people in a system, and especially like their equal participation in a system.
My understanding of democracy is creating a structure or a system in which people can freely express themselves.
And that's not just human beings, but also the nature.
Is actually a huge responsibility. It's a huge word for me.
It's from the people, for the people. However, I have to admit that in my lifetime, I don't think I've really truly experienced democracy in that sense.
I never felt the ownership of democracy. Defining democracy is a hate and love relationship because it was a dream back in Egypt. All the time you're speaking and seeking to be a democratic country.
For me, democracy is about finding a common ground.
I would say democracy starts like within the self, like within the home. I feel like it's more than just a system of governing.
The courage to defend freedom, not only at the ballot box. It's about every day through action, dialogue, and empathy.
In different contexts, democracy is also different.
This is the process. This is not the fixed system. It's something about your choice, what you can do.
A place where people belong and really hold ourselves accountable.
To influence and affect their surrounding, their community, or the country or the state that they're in.
Creating a system that balances between the power of the government and the power of intermediary bodies.
I think it's a way for people to be represented, for minorities to have a voice, and just overall for people to come together to
include those voices.
Find a common ground.
Being able to express their full potentiality and being supported in that.
Without being subjected to any oppression of freedom of speech, being subjected to any kind of violence as a byproduct of this expression.
Advocating our rights and duties in a way that we are respectful and mindful of each other's diversity and cultures.
Freedom to choose, for me, whatever I want.
Where there's freedom of speech, where there's freedom of thought.
For me, it's kind of part of my identity now. That's how I relate to others.
The most accurate representation of democracy has been in my day-to-day tasks.
It's a system that must protect every individual rights.
When you co-create, collaborate, and open to listen actively.
And for them to have some sort of empowerment of their opinions, their interests, and whatever that these people are advocating for.
Is more than just voting rights or giving people their fundamental rights, which of course is a necessity, but it is also about
collective effort in working together in providing opportunities so that everyone is represented in the work that allows societies to come together.
Reflect on everyone's experience.
Where people are able to work together, hear each other's differences, acknowledge each other's differences, and come to some type of consensus.
Democracy is this idea of constantly sharing this value of representation and also leveraging the voices, all voices within that space.
So that no power is actually getting over the other to live and to coexist together.
I think overall, I can define it by what is the purpose, and it's to search justice, organization, and harmony in the world.
distinguished participants, esteemed friends. It's a great honor and pleasure to join you here today at the opening of this year's edition of the Co-Democracy Forum. And I wish to begin by extending my most sincere thanks to our host, the Co-Initiatives of Change Foundation, in particular its president, Madame Jacqueline Cotte, and Executive Director, Mr. Ignacio Packer, for convening us in this magnificent venue. While this prestigious palace might typically call for a celebration, in today's geopolitical context, we are not exactly gathered in a moment of joy, but rather, I would say, in a solemn moment of reckoning. At a time when headlines overflow with conflict and crises, when cities burn, when civilians suffer in silence and children starve, when hope begins to waver, we are reminded that democracy is more than a system of governance. It's a reflection of how we value human life, of the importance we attached to our shared humanity. It is in the war-ravaged schoolroom, the silenced human rights defender jailed for exposing facts, and the marginalized community denied a voice that we witness the heavy price of democracy's breakdown. Because democracy, the system so many of us were raised to believe would steadily expand and bring hope to every corner of the world, is faltering. It is unraveling in places where we thought it was secure, and it is being subverted in ways we never fully anticipated. Let's be clear, it's not vanishing overnight. Rather, in most places, it is hollowing out slowly and discreetly by disinformation, division, and disengagement. And happening in states where democratic institutions do exist, but are simply no longer animated by democratic values. What we are witnessing is therefore not just democratic stagnation, but democratic backsliding, deliberate, strategic, and very often legal. Dear friends, today's threats to democracy hide behind hashtags. They spread through distorted algorithms and masquerade as truth, outrage, and the voice of the people. Social media, once hailed as a beacon of freedom, has twisted into a tool of manipulation. We live in digital echo chambers where truth is silenced and conspiracy profits from every click. And the result? Public trust erodes, institutions weaken, citizens grow cynical, and in this vacuum, demagogues rise. And it isn't a glitch, it's the design. Unregulated digital systems left to operate in fragile democracies don't just bend the rules, they quietly rewrite them. Slow, deliberate shifts cloak illegitimacy in legality. But law without legitimacy is empty. And across the world, we are paying the price for that bargain. Wherever basic rights are suspended without consequences, wherever human suffering is rationalized, and wherever legal norms are bent to suit the powerful, the foundation of democracy cracks, and with it, our shared humanity. And in this increasingly unstable landscape, one institution continues to stand firm as a moral compass and a guardian of democratic integrity, and that is the Council of Europe. And for the past 76 years, since its creation in 1949, it has served as Europe's conscience, defining standards, setting expectations, and offering a space for accountability when others fall silent. And it is the Council of Europe, in fact, that gave us the European Convention on Human Rights and the system that was created around it, including the European Court of Human Rights, that remains the most advanced system of protection of fundamental human rights around the world. It was also the Council of Europe that did not shy away from expelling the Russian Federation for its blatant, grave violation of the statute. And just 2 weeks ago, it was the Council of Europe that established a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. This was an unprecedented and historic act, solemnized by President Zelensky and Secretary General Alain Berset's signing ceremony, which marked a profound commitment for justice and accountability for Ukraine. And Malta, as the presidency of the Committee of Ministers, is proud to have led the committee towards this defining moment, standing firm in the conviction that upholding international law is a responsibility and also a necessity to reject the growing and extremely dangerous might is right narrative. And building on our recent leadership roles at the United Nations Security Council and the OSCE, Malta's presidency of the Committee of Ministers places human dignity, justice and democratic renewal at the forefront of Europe's response to an increasingly fragile and complex geopolitical landscape. By fiercely protecting children from sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, both offline and online, by promoting digital citizenship education across all ages, by combating violence and discrimination in all its forms, and in particular gender-based violence, by empowering young people as active architects of democracy and ensuring their meaningful participation in decision-making, and by standing unwaveringly with Ukraine towards a just and lasting peace, Malta seeks to prove that principled leadership isn't measured by a country's size, but by the courage to face challenges with clarity, resolve, and steadfast commitment to the crucial values of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Dear friends, if we are to remain relevant in shaping the 21st century, we must confront a painful truth, that democracy must evolve in order to endure. And as Secretary General Alain Berset recently said, we cannot meet today's challenges with yesterday's playbook. And it is in this spirit that he launched the new Democratic Pact for Europe, a vision that the Maltese presidency wholeheartedly supports and actively contributes to in recognition of the urgent need for democratic renewal. Because we cannot revive democracy by returning to a past that no longer exists. We must adapt, we must urgently reimagine and revitalize democracy. Otherwise, democracy will fade in silence as people lose faith that their voices actually matter. Through complacency, through neglect, and the slow acceptance of dysfunction, their voice will quietly surrender. And it is that silent surrender that is the greatest threat of all. And so we must together prevent this quiet collapse, because what's at stake is not only the future of democracy, but it is the dignity and the worth of every human life. When truth is allowed to erode and empathy to fade, we lose more than institutions, we lose each other. And that is why change cannot be passive. It must be deliberate, it must be courageous, and it must be unrelenting. We must show up with an open mind and an open heart. We must listen with empathy. We must confront the hard truths, and we must act. And that is the spirit of this forum, to be the change you want to see in the world. So let us make sure to leave this forum not only inspired, but resolute. To not only dream of change, but to embody it fully and fearlessly. Because the future of democracy and the soul of our shared humanity depends on what we choose to do next. I thank you for your attention.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Co-Democracy Forum and to engage with all of you. I'm one of those colleagues who is here for the first time. But let me start to thank Jacqueline Côté and Ignacio Paquer of the Co-Initiative for Change Foundation for inviting me to deliver a keynote address today. I'm addressing to you in my capacity as Commissioner General of UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. 2 years ago, many people outside the United Nations and the Middle East were not familiar with UNRWA, despite our massive regional footprint with some 30,000 staff across the occupied Palestinian territory, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. However, since the war in Gaza began, UNRWA has been a bellwether for the changes sweeping across our multilateral system and the rule-based international order that has been in place since the end of the Second World War. The international commitment to human rights and the rule of law, so painstakingly fostered over 3/4 of a century, is challenged today in ways that dangerously threaten the principles and values that lie at the heart of the liberal democratic tradition. It is impossible to overstate the impact of the abhorrent attack of 7 October 2023 on Israel and the brutal war on Gaza that followed. The attacks on Israel triggered a deep, collective, and intergenerational trauma. The shock and horror of the attacks have reverberated across North America, Europe, and elsewhere, polarizing societies on the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Israeli government response has pushed far beyond the guardrails of international law and the United Nations system. The results are devastating. Nearly 2 years of the most intense bombardment of a civilian population since World War II and the restriction of humanitarian aid far below minimum needs have transformed Gaza into a dystopian nightmare. More than 55,000 people are reported killed, mostly women and children. Thousands more lie unaccounted for under the rubble or have succumbed to starvation or disease. Some 2 million people have been forcibly displaced multiple times across a decimated territory. No one and nowhere is safe. To compound this dire situation, the principal international aid operation led by the United Nations, of which UNRWA is a crucial part, has been replaced by a new mechanism that is costing more lives than it saves. Starving people are compelled to walk for miles and stand for hours in wired enclosures in blistering heat to receive food. They are shot at and hundreds have been killed and injured. This is not an aid operation. It is a weaponization of humanitarian assistance, the grotesque culmination of nearly 2 years of inaction and impunity for the atrocities committed in Gaza. In the shadow of Gaza, appalling violence is taking place across the occupied West Bank, which is under lockdown. Additional restrictions on the movement of people and goods are intensifying the impact of brutal military operation by the Israeli security forces and rampant violence by Israeli settlers. In the north of the West Bank, Palestinians have been displaced from camps at level not seen since 1967. Public infrastructure is systematically destroyed, so Palestinians cannot return, and the demography of camps is permanently altered. Annexation is well on the way. The events on and after 7 October 2023 have generated a seismic changes. We are living in dangerous and unpredictable times. Dangerous not only because of the war in Gaza and escalating tensions in the region, but also because the rules-based international order is fraying. The Geneva Convention were put in place 75 years ago to protect civilians and non-combatants during conflicts, a set of rules on which we all agreed. But do we still? Today, the Convention are so undermined that they are at risk of becoming irrelevant. The lack of meaningful action in defense of international law in weakening the foundation of our multilateral system will have consequences. It is fueling growing resentment in the global south, where many perceive that the values enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in international law do not apply equally, and certainly not when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. In Gaza, under our watch, we have seen an unprecedented, blatant disregard for the Geneva Convention, as well for the United Nations, personal premises and operation. The principle of distinction and proportionality have lost all meaning, and total impunity prevails. Hospitals, schools, and civilian infrastructure have been indiscriminately targeted. Humanitarian and health workers have been killed, Palestinian journalists are silenced, and international media is banned. UNRWA has been uniquely affected. More than 320 personnel have been killed, and most of our premises have been damaged or destroyed. Without accountability for this attack, we set a dangerous precedent that will compromise humanitarian and human rights work across the world. Gaza cannot be dealt in isolation, no doubt. We must ask ourselves how we have arrived at this juncture where broadly accepted rules and shared value are so fundamentally contested. The war in Gaza has revealed a highly concerning deficit of mutual empathy and deeply entrenched prejudice. This attitude has been fostered over decades through competing narrative anchored in divergent beliefs about what triggered the conflict. Narratives that have been often cynically exploited to gain and maintain political power. Today, Israeli and Palestinian are neighbors who no longer know each other, divided by war and growing isolation. It is both tragic and ironic because Palestinians and Israelis share a long and profound history of oppression, grief, and loss that most of us could not begin to imagine or understand. Hannah Arendt said that the death of empathy is one of the first and most telling signs of a culture on the verge of descending into barbarism. Losing our empathy is a prelude to losing our humanity. Rising populism and bigotry are a threat to human rights and the rule of law, undermining democratic principles and institutions. International solidarity around our shared values is needed now more than ever, and each of us has a role to play. I'm often asked how we should respond to the profound challenges confronting the rules-based international order. Is there a balance to be struck between holding firm to principle and pragmatic accommodation? While compromise is a central tenet of resolving conflict and disputes, I believe that core principles and values cannot be negotiated. For humanitarians, our ability to provide life-saving assistance depend on strict adherence to the principle of humanity, independence, impartiality, and neutrality. We cannot, under any circumstances, be part of effort that flout this principle by discriminating against people in need of assistance or politicizing human suffering. Wars and humanitarian crises are deeply complex. To navigate them effectively, we must maintain clarity regarding our purpose and be guided by a lawful mandate. However, this is not enough. We also have an obligation to speak out about violation of human rights and international humanitarian law, even when it is inconvenient and uncomfortable, even when violations are committed by friends and allies, even when it comes at a professional and personal cost. Archbishop Desmond Tutu reminded us of the moral imperative to act against injustice when he stated that to be silenced in the face of oppression is to choose the side of the oppressor. Silence is complicity, so is inaction. My colleagues at UNRWA have spoken out forcefully against the horror and indignities that Palestinians have endured in Gaza. Images and stories from our shelters have opened the eyes of the world to the inhuman condition displaced people endure. Testimonies from children denied access to food, water, medicine, and education have reached audiences like you, thanks to our staff. UNRWA has loudly and repeatedly raised the alarm regarding violation of international humanitarian law and the United Nations Charter. We have identified this violation as part of a long-standing political project to separate Palestinians from Palestine. Our information has helped to create an evidence base for the ruling of the International Court of Justice. To be vocal is a choice and, in my view, a duty. The primary responsibility for addressing humanitarian challenges and political crises lies with the member states of the United Nations, all of which are obligated to act to uphold international law. Where quiet diplomacy and public expression of concern and condemnation fail to influence the action of a rogue government, alternative measures should be considered. Individuals also play a critical role. Governments, at least in most democracies, are ultimately accountable to their citizens. It is therefore incumbent upon each of us to engage actively with democratic institutions and processes to demand that our representatives our representative uphold international law and protect human rights. In the context of Gaza, we must demand an immediate ceasefire, an unconditional release of the hostages, and unimpeded humanitarian access. We must also insist on a meaningful political pathway that addresses the long-standing question of Palestine. This is the only way to fully implement the ruling of the International Court of Justice. It is the only way to honor the intention of the international community as expressed in numerous resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council. And it is the only way to stop a steady descent into chaos in the occupied Palestinian territory that will shatter any prospect for peace in the region and haunt us for decades to come. I stated at the beginning of my remark that these are dangerous and unpredictable times, but we do not have the luxury of despair or inaction. We must persist in vigorous defense of our common humanity and shared value. There is too much at stake to do differently. Thank you.
Mesdames et messieurs, le monde est en rupture d'humanité. Le désordre est ahurissant et la confusion extrême. La décadence morale gangrène sur les champs de bataille et dans les esprits. La raison du plus fort et du plus riche fait la loi et nous apporte jour après jour de nouveaux outrages. Le désarroi est écrasant face aux exactions quotidiennes de chef d'État recherché pour crimes de guerre et un leader du monde libre pris d'ivresse et d'arrogance du pouvoir. Nous devons le dire ici haut et fort. La dignité de l'être humain ne souffre aucune excuse ni d'exception. Elle est absolue et passe avant tous les autres principes, même pour un pays neutre. En proclamant, je cite, « Tous les êtres humains naissent libres et égaux en droit et en dignité », la Déclaration universelle n'autorise aucune nuance ni catégorisation. Tous, c'est tous. Elle n'est pas négociable non plus. Le non-respect du droit international en est une des causes premières. Les grands et ceux qui sont dans leur sillage s'en moquent. Oubliez la déclaration de Roosevelt et de Churchill du 14 août 1941, je cite, « La tyrannie nazie, une fois définitivement détruite, ils espèrent voir s'établir une paix qui offrira à toutes les nations les moyens de demeurer en sécurité à l'intérieur de leurs propres frontières et qui assurera à tous les êtres humains de tous les pays la possibilité de vivre durant toute leur existence à l'abri de la peur et du besoin. » Mais encore, jeter aux orties la Charte des Nations Unies, dont l'article 2 stipule « L'organisation est fondée sur le principe de l'égalité souveraine de tous ses membres et les membres de l'organisation règlent leurs différends internationaux par des moyens pacifiques, mais encore s'abstiennent dans leurs relations internationales de recourir à la menace ou à l'emploi de la force. » Excusez-moi de relire devant vous des passages élémentaires des textes fondateurs, mais parfois j'ai le sentiment que nombreux sont les dirigeants prétendument élus démocratiquement, proclamant l'état de droit, qui ne les ont même pas lus. Ce n'est pas possible autrement. C'est vrai, par exemple, pour l'article 55 des Conventions de Genève, je cite, « Dans toute la mesure de ses moyens, la puissance occupante a le devoir d'assurer l'approvisionnement de la population en vivres et en produits médicaux. Elle devra notamment importer les vivres, les fournitures médicales et tout autre article nécessaire lorsque les ressources du territoire occupé seront insuffisantes. » La Suisse en est le dépositaire. Et Israël fut, en 1951, déjà le 15e État parti sur plus de 190, par la suite, à les ratifier. La deuxième est la plus profonde des causes et la décadence morale. Il y a d'abord l'agression russe du 22 février 2022 contre l'Ukraine. Ce n'est pas une guerre, affirme l'envahisseur, violant à peu près tous les principes élémentaires du droit international et continuant à déverser aveuglément, plus de 3 ans après, toutes les nuits plus de 500 missiles et drones sur la population civile. Comble d'hypocrisie, je cite, « Les frappes militaires non provoquées contre un État membre souverain de l'ONU, ses concitoyens, ses villes pacifiques et ses infrastructures d'énergie nucléaire sont catégoriquement inacceptables. » Qui a dit ça et pourquoi? Eh bien, c'est le ministère russe des Affaires étrangères qui condamne l'attaque d'Israël contre l'Iran. Une contradiction hallucinante. Est-ce que Poutine est vraiment pervers? Autre source d'horreur, on l'a entendu, l'attentat terroriste du 7 octobre 2023 par le Hamas. La tuerie sauvage et la prise d'otages subit une condamnation mondiale. Israël jure des représailles sans merci. Elles sont brutales et sans pitié. L'UNRWA est interdite à Gaza. Le secrétaire général des Nations Unies est déclaré persona non grata dans un pays membre. Face aux critiques, Israël et les États-Unis créent la Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Le schéma est carrément diabolique. La population palestinienne de Gaza, affamée par le boycott appliqué avec rudesse, est prise pour cible au moment des distributions de vivres. Gaza fait penser à un immense camp de concentration avec une population de 2 millions poussée aux dernières extrémités de la déshumanisation. Une véritable cour des miracles, les Palestiniens étant traités d'animaux humains. Tout cela se passe dans un État dit démocratique et de droit. En face, il y a le désormais ridicule prix Nobel autoproclamé de la paix. L'un de ses premiers gestes de pacification consista à décréter des sanctions à l'encontre des représentants de la Cour pénale internationale. Question de déshonneur, le Hongrois Orbán fait mieux encore en révoquant la ratification du statut de Rome lors de la visite de Netanyahou. Nous parlons toujours d'État démocratique et de droit. Selon Justin Wolfers, économiste de l'Université de Michigan, le MAGA est le plus vaste programme de redistribution des pauvres vers les riches de l'histoire des États-Unis. La nation la plus riche s'enrichit aux dépens de ses partenaires selon le principe « les nantis d'abord ». Même ces jours passés, Obama et Bush en sont choqués. Il n'est pas possible d'énumérer la liste complète des monstruosités et égoïsmes instaurés par Trump. Les États-Unis se retirent de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, des accords de Paris sur l'environnement. Ils agressent, il faut le dire, verbalement, certes pour l'instant, leurs amis avec des revendications territoriales sur le Canada, le Panama et le Groenland, à l'encontre de la souveraineté des membres de l'ONU. Le président Trump, dans une mise en scène qui m'a rappelé la révélation des 10 commandements, décrète des droits de douane punitifs, exorbitants, une sorte de Mickey Mouse Economics qui met hors fonction l'OMC, carrément. Le but est une extorsion de plus de 400 milliards de dollars sur le dos des amis européens, ces derniers étant désormais qualifiés de plus grands ennemis des États-Unis. Tous s'abaissent docilement face à l'arrogance américaine. Pour l'Europe, cela se fait dans la division. Mais je vous le demande, quel intérêt y a-t-il à négocier avec un partenaire qui ne respecte pas ses engagements? Et tout cela se passe à l'extérieur de l'ONU et à l'écart du droit international, bien que les États-Unis fussent l'un des plus grands promoteurs du multilatéral. Pensez au président Wilson, la Société des Nations, ou à Eleanor Roosevelt, celle qui a œuvré pour obtenir la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme. La troisième cause est donc l'enlisement des institutions multilatérales. Le Conseil de sécurité des Nations unies ne parvient pas à prononcer de sanctions contre la Russie, ni à déployer l'action de l'UNRWA à Gaza. bloqué qu'il est par les vétos russes ou américains. La Fédération de Russie a même présidé l'organe, le Conseil de sécurité, qui devait la sanctionner. C'est comme si on faisait le braconnier garde-chasse. Oui, le monde est complètement désorienté. Sous l'impulsion de quelques autocrates, le marasme moral est total et dominé par le mensonge, la mauvaise foi, la haine, la brutalité physique et verbale, la sophistication de la tuerie. Pensez aux drones, quelle arme des lâches, puisque les kamikazes au moins sacrifiaient leur vie. Là, vous pouvez faire ça dans votre salon. L'hypocrisie, les nouvelles technologies et intelligence, l'arbitraire, la lâcheté, la grossièreté, la sottise, la vilainie et les incohérences. Le monde entier se retrouve sur un carrousel infernal. La Suisse aussi est prise dans la tourmente et peine à se positionner. Le Parlement, après les tergiversations piteuses à propos du financement de l'UNRWA, débat maintenant sur le renvoi des réfugiés ukrainiens vers des régions considérées comme sûres. Je vous demande lesquelles. Et l'UDC lance une initiative pour rendre absolue la neutralité, même face aux crimes de guerre, oubliant que depuis les conventions de La Haye en 1907, la Suisse a initié les conventions de Genève, a ratifié la Charte des Nations Unies, a présidé la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme, c'était Lucius Wildraber, et est aujourd'hui le siège du Conseil des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies. Le Conseil fédéral se mure dans le silence. Il accorde finalement une modeste aide à l'UNRWA. Mais qui, spécifie-t-il, ne doit pas profiter à Gaza, où pourtant les besoins sont les plus urgents. Quel cynisme! C'est symptomatique pour le malaise et le désarroi ressentis par de larges couches. Mais que faire? Nous sommes tous responsables d'une manière ou d'une autre, mais nous avons tous le sentiment d'être impuissants. En écrivant les ruptures et en étalant cette situation pour mieux faire comprendre les choses aux gens, je me dis, et alors quoi vont-ils te dire? Qu'est-ce que nous pouvons faire? Nous devons parler de paix, tous, pour déclencher une dynamique pacifique, contagieuse, une véritable escalade de la paix. On parle toujours de l'escalade de la violence, mais tentons une escalade de la paix. Il faut dire ce qu'on entend par la mise en place de la coopération, de l'amitié entre les peuples. Nous ne voulons pas être des pacifistes naïfs, mais notre but ultime, néanmoins, c'est la paix. Oui, nous devons tous parler de la paix, partout, sans arrêt, le dire, le proclamer, l'enseigner, le chanter, le prier. Nous devons imposer au gouvernement de parler de la paix. Nous devons forcer les belligérants de cesser le feu et les obliger à dire ce qui est à faire après les combats. Notre objectif, notre souci constant doit être la paix. Nous devons exiger une rupture en faveur de la paix. Au dialogue guerrier, nous devons opposer la rhétorique de la paix et de l'humanisme, car le silence nous rend complices. Je termine en m'adressant à Philippe Lazzarini, notre compatriote à la tête de l'UNRWA, qui doit se battre quotidiennement, à commencer par la mauvaise foi des cœurs de pierre qui sévissent malheureusement aussi dans son pays d'origine. J'ai honte. Mais j'ai aussi de l'espoir parce que vous nous avez donné de l'espoir en démontrant que à l'UNRWA se trouve quelqu'un de responsable, mais aussi de systématique et de réaliste. C'est pour ça que nous devons aussi, et je termine par là, avoir l'espoir. Nous avons la foi que finalement la parole, l'intelligence vaincra la violence et la sottise des gens qui croient que la force vaut tout. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
To be vocal is a choice and a duty. And I think we've had some extraordinary examples of people who are just doing that and making the choice of being vocal. Thank you very much. One of our colleagues of Initiatives of Change is carrying a grief that words can scarcely contain. His sister and her husband were killed in Gaza on Sunday, victims of violence that tear them away from their children and from their family. And these are not isolated incidents. In countless unnamed places, families are being devastated by violence. To you, dear colleague, and to every person in this room who has experienced the pain of losing a loved one to violence, we offer our deepest condolences. Words can never fill the void left behind, but let them carry our collective sorrow, our outrage, and our resolve. And before I continue and close this opening session, I invite each of you to take a quiet moment to hold in your heart the faces and names of those you have lost and those whose lives have been unjustified taken. Thank you. And this, what we've just had, is a moment of shared strength, of purpose, and of regaining hope. And we've just been, as I said, deeply moved by the different speakers that we have had today, calling for wisdom, urgency, and heart. From Jacqueline Côté's grounding welcome to powerful reflections by Ambassador Francesca Camilleri, Philippe Lazzarini, Joseph Dice, and the passionate energy of Hajar Bitri and the youth of Reimagining Democracy. Thank you. Here in Co, we say change begins with me. This is a foundational for the organization. The journey to revitalizing democracy does not begin at the top. It begins when someone dares to act with integrity, listens with humanity, and builds trust through honest dialogue, and finds the courage to face discomfort and holds onto hope. The stories we just heard show what's possible when we create the right conditions. At Initiatives of Change, this is our purpose. 1, to offer safe spaces to speak truth, and even when it's hard. 2, to host honest conversations where wounds are acknowledged and trust can grow. And 3, to make space for silence where inner reflection allows conscience to speak. This is what the Co-Initiatives of Change movement stands for, a belief that personal transformation and political change go hand in hand. Over the next 5 days, you'll hear more stories, some painful, some hopeful, all deeply human. These are not side notes. They are the pulse of democracy. Thank you all for your commitment to a conscious, inclusive, and living democracy. Now, quickly, a brief look ahead. This week, the Core Democracy Forum will offer over 60 sessions, featuring more than 100 speakers from around the world and guided by 5 values: humanity, integrity, trust, courage, and hope. And the program includes keynotes, workshops, and inspiring contributions from civil society, government, and youth leaders. You'll engage in intimate candlelight conversations, community circles, and action-focused groups. And this includes 3 roundtables organized by AFC France, Conflicts in the Middle East, a detour through France. We have a number of common cause groups in this program from the business community, from teenagers, from the situation in Afghanistan, and many more. And each day begins with an indigenous-led greeting of the day and a moment of silent reflection. Actually, tomorrow morning, 7 p.m. on the lawn for the greetings of the day. 7 a.m. Yeah, some may arrive late then. We have 3 core tracks on this conference: Healing the Wounds of the Past, A Thriving Economy for People and Planet, and Fostering Social Cohesion. We'll also share meals, sing and dance, attend film screenings, and explore powerful art exhibitions. Inclusion and diversity are at the heart of this forum, and we welcome participants from over 50 countries in this forum. Now, what's happening now, today? And I'm going to skip the next 2 hours. At 5:45, we will gather just outside there at the main hall for a reception. Intention was to do it outside, but we've gone to plan B because of the weather. And during the reception at 6 o'clock, we will have the inauguration of the core Peace Park initiatives, and at 6:30, the vernissage of our 3 key exhibitions that we have: Dialogues on Humanity, which is a partnership with Photo Élysée and the ICRC, exploring humanitarian values; Democracy, What Democracy, which is a political cartoonist from Gadot and Willis, sharp and thought-provoking; and thirdly, The Nuclear Cries Through Innocent Eyes, a moving installation by young Pacific Islanders confronting the legacy of nuclear testing in the Pacific. Dinner will be served at 7 p.m. And due to the weather conditions, dinner will be inside. To avoid queuing, you may want to either dash rapidly to dinner, or then take a bit more time at the reception. At 20:30, join us in the Court Palace Theatre, so right here, for a jazz concert with Licia Cherry and Raoul Bowman in collaboration with the Montreux Jazz Artists Foundation. Still not over. And at 10 o'clock p.m., we close our day in the peaceful court chapel with meditative songs for peace, unity, and reconciliation. But I did skip a part, no? What happens just after this? Well, after, and with gratitude for Jean-Marc Vignoli, who doesn't play the violin, he grounds us in and gives us the moment to welcome what has been said. We will you'll be invited to go and have a refreshment on the second floor. We're on the 4th floor. Go down to the 2nd floor to the dining room. And then afterwards, you are invited and to try and be on time for 4:15, and you'd have the chance to join one of the 3 interactive sessions that we have. We have session 1, which is on integrity, right here in the theater. I go a bit slower so you can see the photographs of who's involved. Session 2, which is on trust, in the main hall. And then the session 3, which is in the galleries, which is also on the same floor, but on the other wing of the Court Palace, where we'll be talking about courage. So please, come ready to listen, but also to share your hopes, your challenges, and your truth. Don't miss, be punctual, and welcome to go and have a refreshment in between. Thank you.